Have you ever received a letter that changed the way you see your entire life? Not an email, not a message on your phone, but a real letter, written slowly by hand, a letter that someone wrote when they knew they might not have much time left. What would you do if you found such a letter years later? Would you open it right away? Or would you be afraid of what it might say? Tonight's story begins with a simple envelope. An old envelope, yellow at the corners, quietly waiting in the back of a wooden drawer for almost 10 years. Michael Carter was 52 years old when he found the letter. It happened on a quiet Sunday afternoon in early autumn, the kind of afternoon when the sunlight feels soft and the world moves a little slower. Michael had decided to clean the attic of his childhood home. The house still belonged to him, but he rarely visited anymore. It stood on a quiet street in a small town in Ohio, the same street where he had grown up, the same street where his father had lived for almost 40 years. The attic smelled like dust and old wood. Boxes were stacked along the walls. Some were filled with photo albums. Others held forgotten toys, old school notebooks, and things that once seemed important but had slowly disappeared from daily life. Michael opened one box after another. Old baseball cards, a broken clock, his mother's cooking notebooks, a winter scarf that still smelled faintly of cedar. Then he found the small wooden desk. It had belonged to his father. Michael remembered it well. His father used to sit there every evening after dinner, sometimes writing, sometimes reading, and sometimes simply staring quietly out the window. Michael wiped the dust from the surface of the desk. He slowly opened the top drawer. Inside were a few pens, a small notebook, and one envelope. Just one. The envelope was old but carefully sealed. On the front, written in neat handwriting, were 5 simple words. To my son, Michael. Michael froze. He recognized the handwriting immediately. It was his father's. His father, Robert Carter, had passed away 9 years earlier. A sudden heart attack on a cold February morning. There had been no warning, no long hospital stay, no final conversation, just a phone call that changed everything. Michael remembered that day clearly. He had been in Chicago for work, a meeting, a busy schedule, deadlines, and emails. Then his phone rang, his neighbor from back home. The voice on the phone sounded strange, quiet, careful. Michael, you should come home. Everything after that felt like a blur. The long drive, the hospital hallway, the silence. Michael had always believed there would be more time, more weekends, more visits, more conversations, but life rarely follows the plans we make in our heads. And now, 9 years later, here was a letter. Michael sat down slowly on the attic floor. The wooden boards creaked softly beneath him. Outside the small attic window, leaves were falling from the tall maple tree in the yard. Autumn had arrived again. He turned the envelope over in his hands. The paper felt fragile, like something that had been waiting patiently. For years, Michael's mind filled with memories of his father. Robert Carter had been a quiet man, and not the type who spoke a lot, but when he did speak, his words mattered. He worked as a mechanic in a small garage for most of his life. Grease on his hands, a calm voice, a steady presence. People trusted him, not just with their cars, but with their problems too. Neighbors often stopped by just to talk. Robert would listen more than he spoke, and somehow, after talking with him, people always seemed to feel better. But Michael and his father had not always understood each other, especially when Michael was younger. Michael had wanted something different, a bigger city, a faster life, opportunities far beyond their quiet town. He left home at 18 for college, then moved to Chicago. A good job, a busy career, meetings, flights, deadlines. Visits home became less frequent. Phone calls became shorter. Sometimes weeks passed without a conversation. It wasn't that Michael didn't love his father. He simply believed there would always be more time. And then one day, there wasn't. Michael stared again at the envelope. To my son, Michael. Why had his father written this letter? When? Did he know something was going to happen? Or was it simply something a father does when he wants to say things that are hard to say out loud? Michael ran his fingers gently across the paper. His heart was beating a little faster now. He realized something surprising. He was afraid to open it, because once he opened it, whatever was inside would become real. What if the letter contained regret? What if his father had been disappointed in him? What if there were things Michael had never understood? The attic suddenly felt very quiet. Even the sound of the wind outside seemed softer now. Michael leaned back against a box of old books. He closed his eyes for a moment. He could almost see his father sitting at that desk. Late in the evening, a small lamp on. The rest of the house dark. Carefully writing, thinking about each word. Maybe stopping sometimes. Maybe looking out the window. Maybe wondering when Michael would read it. Michael opened his eyes again. The envelope was still in his hands, 9 years. The letter had waited 9 years. Slowly, he slid his finger under the edge of the seal. Then he stopped. Not yet. He wasn't ready. Instead, Michael stood up and walked toward the attic window. From there, he could see the backyard, the same backyard where he had played as a child, where his father had taught him how to throw a baseball, where they once built a small wooden treehouse together. He remembered a summer afternoon many years ago. Michael was maybe 10 years old. He had fallen from his bicycle and scraped his knee badly. He cried loudly, certain that the pain was unbearable. His father had knelt beside him, not rushing, not panicking, just calm. "Let's take a look," his father said gently. He cleaned the wound, placed a bandage, then looked Michael in the eyes and smiled. "You're stronger than you think, kid?" At the time, it felt like a simple sentence, just something a father might say. But now, standing in the quiet attic, Michael realized something. His father had always spoken in small sentences, but those sentences often carried something deeper. Maybe the letter would be the same. Maybe it would contain things his father never had the chance to say out loud. Michael walked back to the desk. He sat down in the old wooden chair. The envelope rested on the desk in front of him. The sunlight from the attic window fell softly across the paper. Dust floated slowly in the air. He took a deep breath. Then, finally, very carefully, Michael opened the letter, and the first line he read made his hands tremble. "My dear son Michael, if you are reading this letter, it means many years may have already passed. And if that is true, then I hope life has been kind to you. I also hope that you are not reading this because something bad has happened. Oh, but if you are, then please sit down, take a slow breath, and read this letter the same way I wrote it. Slowly." Michael stopped reading. His hands were slightly shaking. The words felt calm, but they carried a strange weight. It was exactly the way his father used to speak. Simple, quiet, but full of meaning. He looked around the attic again. For a moment, it almost felt as if his father were still there, sitting somewhere nearby, watching silently while Michael read. Michael returned his eyes to the letter. "Michael, you may be surprised that I wrote this. Truthfully, I surprised myself too. I am not a man who writes many letters. You know that. but there are some things that are easier to write than to say out loud. Michael swallowed slowly. That sentence alone already felt painfully familiar. His father had never been good at emotional conversations, not because he didn't care, but because he believed actions were more important than words. And now, here were the words. The letter continued. A few weeks ago, I had a strange feeling. Nothing serious, so don't worry too much about it. Just one of those quiet moments when a man realizes life moves faster than he expected. I sat at the desk after dinner, and the house was very quiet. I started thinking about you, about the boy you used to be, and about the man you have become. Michael paused again. His eyes moved slowly across the handwriting. The ink had faded slightly with time, but every word was still clear. You left this town many years ago, and I know that was the right thing to do. You were always curious about the world, always dreaming about something bigger. Your mother used to say you had city eyes. She said you were looking beyond the horizon even when you were 10 years old. Michael smiled faintly. His mother had passed away long before his father. Cancer had taken her when Michael was in college. She had always been the one who spoke the most in the house. His father had simply listened. The letter continued. When you left for college, I remember standing in the driveway after your car disappeared down the road. Your mother cried that day, but I didn't. Not because I wasn't sad, but because I was proud. Very proud. Michael felt a tightness in his chest. He had never heard those words directly from his father before. In fact, he had always believed something very different. As a teenager, Michael often felt that his father did not fully support his dreams. When Michael talked about moving to a big city, his father would only nod quietly. When Michael spoke about working in business instead of learning a trade, his father simply said, "Make sure you work hard." At the time, Michael thought those responses meant his father did not understand him. But now, reading this letter, that belief was beginning to change. The words on the paper continued. Michael, there is something I want to explain, and maybe I should have explained it many years ago. But fathers sometimes make the mistake of believing their children already understand things that were never spoken. Michael leaned forward slightly. His breathing slowed. Every word felt important now. When you were younger, you probably thought I wanted you to stay here, in this small town, working in the same garage where I spent most of my life. I could see that worry in your eyes sometimes. But the truth is something different. I never wanted you to stay because of me. I only wanted you to stay if it made you happy. And I always knew that your happiness might be somewhere far away from here. Michael felt his throat tighten. He remembered arguments from his teenage years, small disagreements that felt huge at the time. Why do you always talk about leaving? His father once asked. I just want more opportunities, Michael had replied. His father had only nodded and returned to fixing the car engine. At the time, Michael thought that silence meant disapproval, but now the letter continued. Sometimes silence does not mean disagreement. Sometimes it simply means a father is trying to understand his son. Michael wiped the corner of his eye without realizing it. The attic had become very still. Outside, a light wind moved the branches of the maple tree. A few leaves drifted slowly across the yard. Michael continued reading. I know we did not talk as much as we should have. Life becomes busy. Work becomes busy. And suddenly, years pass faster than anyone expected. This happens to every family. But there is something important I want you to remember. A father does not stop thinking about his child just because that child grows older. Not when the child turns 20, not when he turns 30, not even when he becomes 50. Michael felt a deep breath escape from his chest. For years, he had believed distance had slowly weakened the connection between him and his father, but the letter was telling a different story. You may have noticed that I rarely called you first. That was intentional. I did not want you to feel pressure. I wanted you to build your own life without feeling like you had to check in every week. But I always enjoyed hearing your voice, even if the call lasted only 5 minutes. Even if we only talked about the weather. Michael's eyes stopped moving for a moment. He remembered those short phone calls now. They often felt awkward. Neither of them knew exactly what to say, so they spoke about small things. How's work? Busy. How's the weather in Chicago? Cold. Then silence. Then goodbye. And Michael had once thought those conversations meant there was distance between them. But now the letter revealed something else, something much quieter. Michael, there is one more thing I want to tell you, something every father hopes his son will understand one day, but many fathers never find the right moment to say it. Michael leaned closer to the page. His heart beat slightly faster again. Being proud of someone does not always sound loud. Sometimes pride is very quiet. Sometimes it looks like a father simply watching from a distance. I watched you leave this town. I watched you build a life in the city. I watched you solve problems that I never understood. And every time I heard someone mention your name, I felt something simple. Pride. Michael's vision blurred slightly. He had spent many years wondering if his father truly understood the path he had chosen. Now the answer was written clearly in front of him. I may not have said these things out loud, but they were always there, just like the old maple tree in the backyard. It stands quietly, year after year, even when no one is looking at it. Michael slowly lowered the letter. His eyes drifted toward the attic window again. From where he sat, he could see the top of that same maple tree. Its branches moved gently in the wind. The tree had been there his entire life. He had rarely thought about it, yet it had never disappeared. Michael lifted the letter again. There were still several pages left. More words, more thoughts, more things his father had waited years to say. But something about the next paragraph immediately caught his attention. The handwriting changed slightly. The lines were slower, almost as if his father had paused for a long time before writing them. Michael, now I want to tell you about the one mistake I made as a father, and the one thing I hope you will do differently someday. Michael felt his chest tighten again. He had not expected that. A confession. From a man who rarely admitted mistakes. He took a slow breath, then continued reading. And the next sentence made his heart beat louder than before. Michael, now I want to tell you about the one mistake I made as a father, and the one thing I hope you will do differently someday. Michael felt his fingers tighten around the paper. The attic seemed even quieter now. Outside, the afternoon sunlight had begun to fade slightly, turning the sky into a softer shade of gold. Dust floated slowly through the air as if time itself had slowed down inside that small room. Michael continued reading. I have spent many nights thinking about this, not with regret exactly, but with reflection. When a man grows older, he begins to notice the moments he missed, not the big moments. Those are easy to remember. Birthdays, graduations, weddings. But the small moments, the quiet ones, the everyday ones. Those are the moments that disappear before we realize how important they were. Michael paused. His father had always been a man of routine. Work at the garage, dinner at 6, the evening news. Then quiet time at the desk. Michael used to believe those routines meant his father lived a simple life. But now he wondered if there had always been deeper thoughts behind that quiet routine. The letter continued. When you were young, I often believed that providing for the family was the most important job a father had. Working long hours, making sure the bills were paid, keeping the house warm in the winter and cool in the summer. I believed that if I did those things well, everything else would take care of itself. Michael could almost picture his father writing those lines, sitting in that very chair, his large mechanic hands holding the pen slowly, carefully choosing each word. But now, looking back, I realize something important. Providing for a family is necessary, but it is not the same thing as being present. Michael felt that sentence settle deeply inside him. Present, such a simple word, yet somehow heavier than the others. There were many evenings when you were a boy and you asked me to play catch in the yard. Sometimes I said yes, but sometimes I said, maybe tomorrow. Michael's chest tightened slightly. He remembered those moments, standing in the backyard with a baseball glove, waiting, hoping his father would come outside. Sometimes tomorrow came, sometimes it didn't. And here is something fathers do not always understand when their children are young. Children remember the maybe tomorrow moments just as clearly as they remember the yes moments. Michael lowered the letter for a moment. He did remember those evenings, the ones when his father was too tired after work, or the ones when a car at the garage needed to be finished before morning. As a child, and those moments felt disappointing. But now, many years later, Michael also remembered the nights when his father did come outside, the sound of a baseball hitting leather, the smell of fresh-cut grass, the quiet laughter between throws. The letter continued, "Please do not misunderstand me. I do not believe I was a bad father. I tried my best with what I knew at the time. Most fathers do. But wisdom has a strange way of arriving after the years have already passed." Michael nodded slightly as he read. That sounded exactly like something his father would say. Honest, without drama, just truth. If you ever become a father yourself, remember something simple. Your children will not measure your love by how much money you earned or how many hours you worked. They will measure it by something smaller, something quieter, your time. Michael felt his eyes sting again. He had never had children. Work had always come first. Relationships had come and gone over the years, but nothing had lasted long enough to build a family. Now, at 52, he sometimes wondered if that chapter of life had quietly passed him by. But the letter continued. I know life becomes busy, and I know responsibilities grow heavier with age. But whenever possible, choose time. Choose the extra conversation. Choose the extra walk. Choose the extra 5 minutes of listening. Michael remembered something suddenly, a memory from many years ago. He was 14. His school had organized a small science fair. Michael had worked on a simple project about electricity. Nothing impressive, just wires, a battery, and a small light bulb. The presentation was scheduled for the evening. Michael had been nervous all day. He wanted his parents to attend. His mother promised she would come. His father said he would try. And when the evening arrived, Michael stood beside his project table, looking around the crowded school gymnasium. Parents everywhere, children explaining their experiments, teachers walking between the displays. But his father was not there, not at first. Michael remembered feeling disappointed, trying to hide it, pretending it did not matter. Then, just before the judges arrived, the door at the back of the gym opened, and his father walked in, still wearing his mechanic shirt, grease stains on the sleeves, looking slightly tired, but he was there. Michael had forgotten that memory for many years, until this moment. He looked down at the letter again. The truth is, Michael, that children rarely remember every moment of their childhood, but they always remember the moments when someone shows up. Michael took a slow breath. That sentence felt like a quiet echo of that old memory. The letter continued on to the next page. There is another reason I wanted to write this letter. Not because I expect anything from you, but because there are some things fathers want their sons to know before life becomes too quiet. Michael noticed the handwriting again. It had grown slightly slower, more careful. Maybe his father had paused again. Maybe he had stared out the window before continuing. There are many kinds of success in the world: money, titles, big houses, busy careers. These things are not wrong. In fact, they can be good if they are built honestly. But there is another kind of success that people talk about much less: a quiet success. Michael leaned closer. That phrase sounded familiar. Quiet success, the kind that appears when a person treats others with patience, when someone keeps their word, when they help others even when no one is watching, when they live in a way that allows them to sleep peacefully at night. Michael felt something shift inside him. His entire career had been built around visible success, promotions, bonuses, recognition, but the kind of success his father was describing was something very different. The world will always celebrate loud success, but quiet success is often the one that truly matters. Michael sat back slowly in the chair. The attic was beginning to grow darker as evening approached. He realized he had been reading for a long time, yet he did not want to stop. He turned to the next page of the letter. Only a few pages remained now, but something about the next lines made him pause immediately. The handwriting was different again, more uneven, as if his father's hand had been slightly tired. Michael, before I finish this letter, there is one story I want to tell you. A story about a moment when I was very proud of you, and you probably never even noticed it happened. Michael's heart beat a little faster. A story he had never heard before, a moment he had never known existed. He leaned closer to the page and began reading the next line. But the first sentence of that story made him suddenly realize something surprising about his own past. Michael, before I finish this letter, there is one story I want to tell you, a story about a moment when I was very proud of you, and you probably never even noticed it happened. Michael leaned forward in the old wooden chair. The attic had grown dimmer now. The warm afternoon light had slowly turned into the quiet gray of early evening. Somewhere outside, a bird called softly and the wind brushed through the branches of the maple tree. Michael returned his attention to the letter. It was a small moment, so small that you likely forgot it many years ago. But fathers remember certain things longer than their children realize. Michael felt a strange curiosity building in his chest. What moment could his father possibly mean? His mind began searching through memories from childhood, baseball games, school events, family dinners, but nothing obvious came to mind. The letter continued. You were 17 years old. It was late autumn, just a few weeks before you left for college. The weather had already turned cold, and the evenings were getting dark earlier. I remember that particular day because the garage had been very busy. 2 engines needed repairs before morning, and I stayed late to finish them. Michael could almost picture the scene: the small garage in town, the smell of motor oil, the sound of metal tools tapping against steel. Your mother had already gone to bed when I finally came home. It must have been close to midnight. The house was quiet. Most lights were off, but one light was still on in the kitchen. Michael slowed his breathing slightly. He had a faint memory forming somewhere in his mind, but it was still unclear. When I walked into the kitchen, I saw you sitting at the table. You were reading something. A notebook, I believe. At first, I thought you were studying, but then I noticed something strange. Michael felt his curiosity growing stronger. You were not alone. Mrs. Henderson from next door was sitting across from you. Do you remember her? She was the elderly woman who lived alone after her husband passed away. Michael suddenly froze. Yes, he remembered Mrs. Henderson. She had lived next door for many years, a quiet woman with silver hair and kind eyes. After her husband died, she rarely had visitors. The letter continued. And that night she looked worried. Her hands were shaking slightly, and you were sitting there, listening to her very carefully, not interrupting, not rushing, just listening. Michael's memory became clearer now. The pieces of that night slowly returned. Mrs. Henderson had knocked on their door late in the evening. She seemed nervous. Her electricity bill had arrived, and she did not understand something on the paper. Michael had been the only one awake. He remembered inviting her inside. He remembered making tea, but he had completely forgotten that his father had seen the moment. I stood in the hallway for a few seconds without saying anything. You didn't notice me. You were explaining something about the bill, slowly, patiently. Mrs. Henderson looked relieved after you finished. I remember her smiling. It was a small smile, but it was the kind of smile people have when someone takes the time to help them. Michael's eyes softened as he read those lines. He had not thought about that moment for decades. To him, it had been nothing special, just helping a neighbor. But the letter continued. After she left, you stayed at the table for a few minutes. You looked tired, but there was something peaceful about the way you sat there. Then you turned off the kitchen light and went upstairs. You never knew that I was standing in the hallway watching that entire moment. Michael slowly lowered the letter for a moment. His chest felt warm and heavy at the same time. He had never known that his father had witnessed that small act of kindness. When you went upstairs, I sat down at the same kitchen table. And I thought about something your grandfather once told me when I was young. Michael lifted the letter again. He told me that the true character of a person appears in the small moments, not when people are being watched, not when they are trying to impress someone, but when they are simply being themselves. Michael breathed slowly. His father's words felt very calm, very thoughtful. That night, watching you help Mrs. Henderson, I realized something. You had grown into a good man, not because of your grades, not because of your plans to go to college, but because of the way you treated someone who needed help. Michael wiped the corner of his eye quietly. It surprised him how emotional such a simple memory could feel now. The letter continued. That moment made me proud in a way I never explained to you. And fathers sometimes struggle to say those things, not because they don't feel them, but because they believe their children already know. Michael remembered something else suddenly. The next morning, his father had simply said, Mrs. Henderson mentioned you helped her last night. Michael had shrugged. It was nothing. His father had nodded once and replied, Still, that was a good thing to do. At the time, Michael thought it was just a casual comment. He never imagined that the moment had meant so much more. The letter continued. Life will offer many opportunities to become successful, but never forget the small opportunities to become kind. Those are the moments people remember, even if they never say it out loud. Michael slowly leaned back in the chair again. The attic was almost dark now. Only a soft blue evening light entered through the window. He turned to the final page of the letter. The paper felt even more fragile in his hands. His father's handwriting had grown noticeably slower here, almost as if the pen had moved carefully across each word. Michael, if you have read this far, then there is only one final thing I want to say to you. Michael felt his heart beat gently in his chest. The end of the letter was near, but somehow it also felt like the beginning of something else. I do not know where life has taken you by the time you read this. Maybe you stayed in the city, maybe you moved somewhere new, maybe you built a family, or maybe life followed a path neither of us expected. But no matter where you are, there is something I hope you remember. Michael leaned closer to the final lines, and what his father wrote next made him sit completely still. Michael, if you have read this far, then there is only one final thing I want to say to you. I do not know where life has taken you by the time you read this. Maybe you stayed in the city, maybe you moved somewhere new, maybe you built a family, or maybe life followed a path neither of us expected. Michael sat completely still in the old wooden chair. The attic was now quiet in a different way. Outside, the sky had turned deep blue, and the first small stars had begun to appear above the rooftops. The maple tree in the backyard moved gently in the evening wind. Michael returned his eyes to the final lines of the letter. But no matter where you are, there is something I hope you remember. And Michael leaned closer to the page. His father's handwriting had become slower here. The letters were slightly uneven, as if each word had been written with careful thought. Life is not measured by how far you travel, or how busy you become, or how many things you achieve. Those things may fill your calendar, but they do not always fill your heart. Michael felt a quiet heaviness settle inside him. For many years, his calendar had been full. Meetings, flights, deadlines, projects. Success had always meant moving forward quickly. But now, sitting in the quiet attic of his childhood home, those things felt strangely distant. What truly fills a life are the people we care about, the conversations we almost cancel but decide to have anyway, the visits we think we will make next month, the small kindnesses that seem ordinary at the time. Michael slowly breathed in. Each sentence seemed to echo through the attic, because one day without warning, life becomes very quiet, and the moments we remember are rarely the big ones. They are the small evenings, the shared meals, the laughter that seemed unimportant at the time. Michael lowered the letter slightly. For the first time in many years, he thought about how many small moments he had missed, friends he rarely called, relatives he had not visited, neighbors whose names he barely knew. His father's words continued, Michael, if there is one thing I wish for you, it is this. Do not wait too long to tell people that they matter. Do not assume there will always be another weekend, another holiday, another phone call. Michael felt his chest tighten. He thought back to that winter morning 9 years ago, the phone call that had told him his father was gone, the drive home that felt endless, the quiet house. There had been so many things he planned to say someday, questions he planned to ask, stories he planned to hear. But someday had arrived too late. The letter continued. You may wonder why I'm writing all of this. The truth is simple. Fathers do not always know how to say these things out loud, but we feel them every day. Michael's vision blurred slightly again. He blinked slowly and continued reading. I was proud of you when you were a boy. I was proud of you when you left for college. And I was proud of you when you built your life in the city. Even if I did not always say it the way you deserve to hear it. Michael felt a quiet warmth spread through him. For years he had wondered if his father truly understood his life choices. Now he knew the answer had always been yes. But pride is not the most important thing a father feels. Love is, and love does not disappear with distance, or silence, or time. Michael paused again. The attic felt completely still. Even the wind outside had softened. No matter how many years pass, a father always hopes his child finds peace, not just success, not just achievement. Peace. Michael exhaled slowly. Peace. That word felt unfamiliar in his busy life. But tonight, sitting here with this letter, he felt something close to it. The final lines of the letter waited quietly on the page. Take time to look at the sky once in a while. Take time to sit with someone who needs to talk. Take time to laugh. Life moves faster than any of us expect. And if you ever wonder whether I loved you, you already know the answer. Your father, Robert Carter. Michael slowly lowered the letter onto the desk. The room remained silent. For several minutes, he did not move. He simply sat there, letting the words settle in his mind. 9 years. This letter had waited 9 years to be read, and somehow it had arrived at exactly the moment Michael needed it most. He stood up slowly and walked toward the attic window. The backyard looked peaceful in the evening darkness. The old maple tree stood exactly where it had always been, tall, quiet, steady. Michael remembered something his father had written earlier in the letter. The maple tree stands quietly, year after year, even when no one is looking at it. He smiled softly. Then he looked down in the letter again. For the first time in many years, Michael reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He scrolled through the contacts list. There were many names he had not called in a long time. He hesitated for a moment. Then he pressed one number. His younger sister. The phone rang twice before she answered. "Michael," she said, surprised. "It's a little late. Is everything okay?" Michael looked out at the quiet backyard again. "Yes," he said gently. "Everything's okay." There was a small pause. Then he added something he had not said in far too long. "I was just thinking about Dad tonight." On the other end of the phone, his sister's voice softened. "Me too," she said. Michael looked once more at the letter resting on the desk. Then he spoke quietly. "You know something?" he said. "I think he would be happy right now." The two of them talked for a long time that evening, about childhood memories, about their mother, about the quiet strength their father had always carried. And for the first time in many years, Michael did not rush the conversation. He did not look at the clock. He did not think about tomorrow's schedule. He simply listened, just the way his father once did. Sometimes the most important letters in our lives are not the ones we write. They are the ones that remind us how to live.